Hello everyone and welcome back to Lotus Premier Education. My name is Amanda and I want to be your college tutor. Today we're going to talk about a big topic, and that topic is the differences between the SAT and the ACT and how to know which test is right for you. So let's start at the very beginning. Do you guys know when the SAT and the ACT were created? The answer is in the early 1900s, which means yes, it's been almost 100 years since these tests were terrorizing students all across America and all across the world. Just kidding. But in reality, the tests are difficult and they cause a lot of stress for students everywhere. With test optional, some of this stress has only increased because students don't know if and when they should take the tests, how much effort to put in, and we're going to go over all of that today. We have another video all about test optional. You can find the link down below if you guys are interested. So all I'm going to say about that in this video is that you should pretend that test optional is not there for the most part and put all of your effort and energy into taking these tests for the moment, because we don't know how long test optional can continue, and you also don't want to cut back on your potential, since a strong SAT or ACT score can really make a difference in your college process. So, starting with the foundations, several students will ask me, is there an advantage to taking the SAT or the ACT? Do colleges value one more than another? The answer is no. Colleges value both tests exactly the same, and you should take whichever one is a better fit for you and whichever one you think you have higher scoring potential on. The reality is that these two tests are very different from one another. And so what we're going to start chatting about is how they're different and how you can know which is a better fit for you. You want to begin thinking about test prep somewhere between 8th grade and sophomore year. And the reason why I suggest 8th grade, because yes, that is early, is because there are actually things that you can do for pre-test prep that will go a really long way in the college admissions process. We offer pre-test prep to all of our students who are interested. And basically the way that that works is you start really drilling some foundational skills without the pressure of the tests hanging over your head. So you start doing some fun exercises, learning how to think in ways that are productive for test-taking strategies and skill sets, and also for the classroom. Something we really love hearing from students is that the skills they learn during test prep really help them take tests and do well in the classroom in school too. So somewhere between 8th grade and sophomore year, you want to think about where your weak points are in test taking, where your strengths are, and whether you should start kind of a low-key, less stressful form of test preparation. Another thing to keep in mind is that students take the PSAT for the first time somewhere between freshman and sophomore year, usually sophomore year. And so a lot of these exercises and sort of thinking through this can really help you also on your PSAT, which can have benefits for National Merit Awards and also will just have benefits so you can get a more accurate read on how you're going to do as a test taker. On that note, something I hear a lot of parents say is that the PSAT is a good indicator of how my student is going to score on the SAT or the ACT. That is not true. The PSAT is a different test. So while it does have similarities to the SAT, the question types are different, the content does not go nearly as high in a high school curriculum, the number of questions per section are lower, and often students take the PSAT completely cold. When you take something without even looking at it first, it's not going to be a good indicator of how you can actually score once you've put time and effort in. So if you do want to make the PSAT a stronger indicator of how your student will do on the SAT or the ACT, it's a good idea to actually prepare for it, and that might be through a pre-test prep curriculum. Now, once you actually start seriously thinking about taking an official SAT or an official ACT, you need to think about which test process you want to pursue. This thought process should occur somewhere around the end of sophomore year. There are a few key things that we look for to determine whether a student is ready or not to start taking the tests officially. One of those is what math level they're in. You want to make sure that you have learned all of the math that is going to be on the test. And if you're an advanced student who's really high up in high school math, you also don't want to take these tests too far from where the cutoff is, where there's a lot of content you won't remember. We also look for a student's pacing. So the first key difference between the SAT and the ACT is that the ACT has a much faster pace. So if you are someone who can handle a faster test, that is one advantage that you will have on the ACT. So as of this point, let's start talking about some of the key differences between the SAT and ACT, and then we'll get into what you should do to start your test prep journey. So let's begin with the ACT. The ACT is a 4-section test, and like we said before, it does have a faster pace. It starts with an English grammar section, which is 75 questions long. Now, that is a key difference because the ACT has 75 questions, the SAT grammar section only has 44. So the ACT English grammar is almost double, which means you have to have longer endurance to get through that English grammar section. On the opposite side though, the ACT English grammar is often a little bit more basic than the SAT English grammar. And usually on the ACT grammar section, they're only asking you about one topic per question. On the SAT, they'll often put many together. So the ACT starts with a 75-question English grammar. Now, one of the main differences between the ACT and the SAT occurs in the math section, which is section 2 on the ACT. The math section is 60 questions long, and you can use a calculator on all of them. The other thing is that the ACT math is all multiple choice. So it's 60 questions all in a row, multiple choice, and you can use your calculator. And it goes pretty linearly from easier questions to more difficult questions. After that, on the ACT, you get a break, and then there's 2 more sections to go. The first one is the reading section, which is quite short. It is 4 passages in 35 minutes. So it's a very quick reading. This is a key component to whether or not you can take the ACT or the SAT, because the ACT reading, you must complete each passage in under 8.5 minutes, whereas on the SAT reading, you have almost 13 minutes to do so. So that's a very big timing difference. The ACT reading, since you are going at that pace, you should be very good at identifying key pieces of information in the passage and matching them to the questions. After the ACT reading section, there is one more section to go, and that is the science section. And I love talking about the science section because I think it's one of the most misunderstood parts of the ACT. So something that a lot of students will say to me is that they want to take the SAT because the SAT does not have science, and that is not true. The SAT does not have its own science section, but they are still evaluating students for their skill sets in the sciences, which means on the SAT reading and grammar, there are science-based passages. Whereas on the ACT grammar and reading, they are much more humanities focused and science gets its own passage. It is 6 passages long, 40 questions, and 35 minutes, which is pretty short. Something that I love to tell students about the science, there is no way that they can actually test you on science knowledge. And the reason why is because our high school curriculums are not standardized in the science. Some students learn biology, then chemistry, then physics. Some students learn physics, then chemistry, then biology. Some students learn environmental studies, and then biology, and then physics. So there's no way that the ACT can predict what content you have covered. Instead, that science section is more about data analysis. Can you evaluate the data that is right in front of you in that moment? So those are some of the key things you need to know about the ACT. Moving over now into the SAT. The SAT is also 4 sections, but half of the test is math. Yes, you heard that right. So the very first section is a long reading section. It is 5 passages, and like I said, you'd have a maximum of about 12 to 13 minutes per passage. It incorporates a lot of different content into those 5 reading passages. You'll have some that are humanities-based, some that are history-based, some that are science-based. So it requires a much wider variety of skills in order to move through it. The other thing is that since you have more time, the content on the SAT reading is a little bit more dense. So you really want to make sure that you're getting to the content and the point of a lot of the questions in the reading, rather than sort of matching up those key terms. After the SAT reading, you have the SAT English Grammar, which we already talked a little bit about. There's 4 passages, there are 44 questions. You usually have a little bit more time on the SAT Grammar than you do on the ACT Grammar per passage, but just by a slight margin. And on the SAT Grammar, you will often have multiple concepts worked into each question. So the questions themselves are also a little bit more dense. After the SAT Grammar, we have a break, and then you get the 2 math sections. And this is where things get really, really different. On the first math section, it is a math no calculator section, and you have one portion of it that is multiple choice and one portion of it that is fill-ins, which means they don't give you any choices. You have to do the problem, come up with the answer, and put the information into the Scantron. This can often be another point of contention for students. There are some students that are not bothered at all by the fill-ins, and then there are some students that really struggle with those. So that's just something to keep in mind. Then the last section of the SAT is a much longer math section, which is the math calculator section. On this section, you have a longer set of multiple choice questions and then a longer set of fill-in questions. The math on the SAT generally goes about a full level higher than the math on the ACT. So students who are considering the SAT should be pretty proficient with their math curriculum and should be in a higher level. So now that you have all of this information, the next question is, how do you choose the one that's right for you? Well, you really want to make sure that you are spending time making that decision. One of the worst parts of the test prep process is when a student starts preparing for one test, takes a few of those tests, they're not seeing the scores they want, and then they switch to the other one. While this is not the end of the world, because a lot of those foundational skills that we're learning will carry over from one test to the other, it does make your process a lot longer, and we want to really avoid burnout on these tests at all costs. So the way that you should choose between the 2 tests is as follows. You want to think about the testing journey as a full extracurricular for a full year of high school. If your journey ends up being less than that, congratulations, you did great. But there is nothing, and I mean nothing, no tutoring, no prepping, no course, that is going to allow you to just take a test once and be done. I've seen maybe 2 students that has happened to in my entire over 10-year career. So you want to prepare for a multi-test journey. The way to do that is at the beginning of your journey, you want to become familiar with the ACT and become familiar with the SAT. Look at a practice test, buy a book, read some of the content that goes into each of them. We have several SAT and ACT resources on lotuspremiereducation.com and a few more on this channel. You can get yourself knowledgeable first, and then you want to take a diagnostic test of each. And yes, I mean each. Even if you have taken a PSAT, it's not the same as taking a diagnostic SAT. So there are a couple of ways to do this. If you have a larger tutoring company that has an in-person practice near you, they will often offer an introductory SAT or ACT on premises. And that's a great way to get a pretty accurate read of where you're starting from. So I would take one diagnostic SAT, one diagnostic ACT, and then figure out which test is best for you. If you're going to go this route, make sure you know the policies of the tutoring center. Most tutoring centers do not require a commitment for you to take these tests. They will either let you pay for the tests individually, or they will allow you to take them for free, look at your scores, and then decide what you want to do. So just make sure you're knowledgeable about the policies of the tutoring center. Now, to be clear, this first diagnostic SAT and first diagnostic ACT should not be official tests. I hear students say a lot that they're just going to take one cold to see what happens. That is a bad idea. when there are so many official practice tests that are offered. So you want to see if you can get a diagnostic SAT or ACT offered in person near you. If you can't, we have several international students that this is a lot harder for them to do, or students from other parts of the US that might be a little bit more remote or rural. You can find diagnostic SATs and ACTs online. So what you should do is print a full SAT and a full ACT, time yourself, be very, very rigid, and then grade it. After you're done taking a diagnostic SAT and a diagnostic ACT, you should think about two things. The first thing is the experience of the test. Was there one that made you feel more confident or more empowered? Was there one that was a little bit more enjoyable than the other? Your experience taking the test is going to be directly correlated to the success that you are going to see. The second thing you should think about is your score. Where are you going from where you started? If you're seeing scores that you can build upon, that's great. And that means that test might be the right direction for you. If you're seeing scores that you just don't know if you could really improve upon, that's when you should be having conversations with other people and other experts. For more information about how to choose whether the SAT or the ACT is right for you, please comment down below, like, and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you soon.